You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Show. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss Budget 2024, focus on the subnationals. My guest joining me virtually today is Mr. Vahyala Kwaga, Senior Researcher and Policy Analyst, BudgIT Foundation. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Let me begin by asking you, based on what we have in our analysis, out of 36 states, 24 have sent in their budgets for approval from the House of Assembly. But out of the 24, 21 have capital expenditure as a major distribution of the budget. Is this a positive development, and how can we improve the monitoring and tracking of the various infrastructure projects? I know that out of the budget initiative, we have tracker also. How can we see more scale in that regard?
Thank you so much for that question. And I'm glad that you are directing the conversation more towards the subnational units. Oftentimes, we pay a lot of attention to the federal government, and for good reason. The federal government has a large scope and covers a lot of ground, but oftentimes we at times forget that the states are mandated to provide a vast range of public goods and services, ranging from health, education, and infrastructure. So going to your question, I think it's very positive. I'm pleasantly surprised that the states are allocating more to capital expenditure. A lot of what we have been seeing in our analysis, especially our yearly state of states reports, where we look at the fiscal strength, the fiscal health of the 36 Nigerian states, is that states tend to spend more on recurrent expenditure. So I'm talking about overheads, I'm talking about personnel, that's salaries and wages, pension benefits, utilities, and rates. And there seems to be a disconnect between the output of the state, that is, the performance of the state in providing goods and services, and the amount of money spent on salaries and wages. However, a lot of focus needs to be on the provision of capital expenditure. And by that, I mean roads, I mean bridges, I mean a proper road network, I mean energy, and all those things that enhance the livelihoods of not only households, but of businesses. So I think it's a positive development to see a lot of states spending more on capital expenditure. However, I will ask the Nigerians viewing to be very cautious in our optimism, because it's one thing to allocate more to capital expenditure. It's another thing for the budget to actually perform well in terms of implementation. And by that, I mean, how have the releases been for this capital expenditure? So many times you have capital expenditure budgets being drawn up, and throughout the fiscal year, there are hitches, there are glitches, there are problems in monies simply not coming out. And these things range from improper administrative practices, to an improper measurement of the cost of a particular capital expenditure item. And at the end of the fiscal year, you see that the monies actually have not been spent. It's not even that they've been misallocated or they've been stolen, but the money simply was not even released for one problem or the other. And this problem really speaks to what we call budget credibility. Budget credibility is the process whereby a budget is actually meets its targets. You budget to spend 100 naira, you spend 99 naira. That's actually very, very good. You budget to spend 100 naira, you only spend 50 naira, that's not so good. You budget 100 naira, you only spend 20 naira, that's very poor. And that's what we've been seeing, on and on in our analysis. So the second leg of your question is, what can we do about the monitoring? And that really is a very good segue from my submissions in the last question. The idea of monitoring, the idea of evaluation is actually something that the state houses of assembly exist. They exist for the very reason of monitoring and oversight. The founding fathers of the United States, they brought together the best of governments they had seen in the world and ensured that the executive or the president was not the all in all, but was being checked by the judiciary and being checked by the legislature. So you had three arms of government of coordinate powers. So one could serve as a check and a balance for the excesses or abuse of power of the other. So primarily, I'd like Nigerians to put a lot of focus on their state houses of assembly. What are they doing regarding oversight? The same way we've been seeing in the news, the National Assembly, the Senate and the House putting a lot of focus and attention on the federal budget, and a lot of the calls to the heads of agencies by the National Assembly is a perfect example of what state houses of assembly should be doing. State houses of assembly should not just be stamps that the governor comes, brings a budget, and you never see him again. The state house of assembly has the power, is constitutionally empowered, even in the theory of democracy, is empowered to put the executive on their toes. Apart from the work of the state houses of assembly, citizens can also join various civil society organizations. BudgIT is just one of them, that take time out to actually monitor the implementation of capital projects.
Thank you very much. I mean, let me stop you there, because I know you've really raised that fundamental point on monitoring and tracking, and that's a call to all citizens to take that same advocacy from federal to state level. Let's track our state budgets, various state budgets, and ensure that the allocation is going to where it is, particularly in capital projects. If you are going, you'll see the impact. But let's look at another very interesting part, which is the investment in health and education. It's very, very important. I know that budget, in your last 2023 State of State reports, you captured it very well. You said, commendably, not only did 9 states exceed UNESCO's recommendation of allocating 20% of the annual budget and spending to education, 15% of the total expenditure for 17 states went to education. That is really remarkable. Even though in the health part, just 2 states in the north spent above the 15% of their total expenditure following the declaration, Abuja Declaration on Health. So I want to ask you, when we look at so far this budget from the 24 states, I've seen some states like Enugu, Katsina allocating over 20% to education. Is that not a core part of what should be in the budget? Because when you do that, you boost human capital or human development index, I meant to say.
Absolutely. I would like to remind us that there was once a time when a lot of state governments were pushing what we call citizens' budget meetings, where they were bringing citizens into the room where these budgets were at least being conceptualized, or perhaps during the budget proposal development stage, and bringing citizens to seek their input and hear from them, what they think about the size of budget envelopes. I think that's a practice that should be continued, because I know a lot of citizens would be concerned about the allocations to health, the allocations to education. It's very easy for you as a politician, I suppose, to want to do more of infrastructure. And, for good reason. Infrastructure is relatively easy to discharge, because, the money is there, you buy the cement, you buy the sand, you pay for the labor, and you see the effect. You see the output of that bridge or that road or that building, right before your very eyes. But investing in education and health are things that you may not really see their input or their impact until years down the line. So state governors tend to prefer the big line capital budgets. But we always encourage, we always suggest, and we always advise that they take health and education as serious as possible. Just like the comment you made, the livelihood improvement, the quality of workers' skill, the quality of intellect, the quality of life in general is highly linked with the investments in health and in education. So citizens are enjoined to really speak to their elected representatives, to write to their executives on the spending in these health and education sectors.
And if the state governments do very well in that regard, it will help to reduce this whole JAPA syndrome, where we're losing our best brains in healthcare and education overseas, even though it has its own positives in a way. But we need to retain our best talents in those 2 sectors so that they can support our development as a state at the subnational level. But let's look at recurrent expenditure. That is something that is a huge concern for citizens, because when you, like you said, 21 out of the 24 that we highlighted are spending higher on capital expenditure than recurrent. But from what we have so far, 3 out of the 24 that are spending higher on recurrent expenditure. But I want to focus further on the overheads, like you raised earlier. Addressing the issue of overheads, cutting cost of governance is very critical at this time. this is called an austere period in Nigeria. How is it critical for the government, state government, and of course the House of Assembly to detailedly look at this budget and ensure that the issues of overheads are addressed properly and government's cost is cut appropriately so that resources are allocated to where it's required to unlock economic opportunities at the subnational level?
I mean, that's a great question, one that, confronts us in our work all the time. Citizens need to understand that their livelihoods, that their quality of life is directly related to how much their governments, both at the federal, but especially at the state level, are providing for public services. And this is a heavily political process. I will say that there are some states in the federation, I mean, the governors are not there anymore, that there was basically no access to budget implementation reports by those states. So you really could not see how well monies had been budgeted and used by the state. I mean, this is something that must be strongly, strongly refused and rejected. And, it always delights me that members of the Fourth Estate, your organization, social media, and also traditional media go out of their way to provide this information. And it's key because it helps to stimulate conversation. It helps to encourage people to ask questions. So in prioritization of the government expenditure, citizens need to ask their elected representatives when they are reviewing the budget, why is this amount going more to overheads? Why is this amount going more to paying salaries? Why is less of this amount going for capital expenditure? And the elected representatives owe citizens a duty, to explain why they are approving the budget, why they are making changes, why they are recommending a reduction in a particular line item, and why they are recommending an increase in a particular line item. Citizens need to be invested. I mean, there will be times when you would have to take excuse from work, to go for these meetings because they are as critical, they are as important as anything can be. It's been said that if Nigerians take their involvement in politics very seriously, the political class will see that people are watching and they will be forced to actually make better and better decisions. And that's really how you improve the quality of government. But it will not come easy. Organizations like BudgIT, organizations like Connected Development are spending a lot of their time and resources, but with support of citizens, with the demonstration by citizens that they are as interested and as invested in the process as they should be, the quality of feedback from the government will really be a sign that things are actually working.
Looking at achieving this budget 2024, executing the capital project at the subnational level, the various states, like we discussed, are audacious about improving their internally generated revenue and also mobilizing investments to drive inflows and liquidity. I know that budget in your 2023 State of State reports, you highlighted that there was 12.98% increase in overall IGR for the 36 states from 1.61 trillion naira to 1.82 trillion naira in 2022. But you highlighted that the IGR to GDP remains very low at 1.01%. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in improving IGR and mobilizing investments. What do you see as these opportunities for the states? Because you just see various budgets, huge IGR expectations, but that needs to translate to pragmatic steps. And then the issue of attracting investment. The capital importation reports by National Bureau of Statistics always shows Lagos as the major one and 2-3 states come on board. The rest are not really attracting investments.
I mean, this is a very, very complex question because you are confronted by a variety of issues. So Lagos, by and large, is quote unquote an anomaly. Lagos has had a long history of interaction, through its ports and being former administrative capital of Nigeria. It has a lot of historical advantages. Nonetheless, Lagos has been able to concretize its place, as not only Nigeria's leading hub, but even Africa's hub to a very large extent. If you look at the number of startup businesses, Lagos often boasts having more than contenders like Johannesburg, like Cairo, and even like Kenya.
Casablanca and the rest.
Yes. So you see, Lagos has that advantage, but other states need to really look inward. What are their comparative advantages? With the coming on stream of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, I think states in Nigeria have they have the opportunity to really showcase their goods and services to the rest of the African sub-region. With the common external tariff as well, businesses in these states can even see what types of products that they can export to other parts of the continent. It mustn't necessarily be we trade with the big names like the Englands or the Frances or the United States, but we can even start, ramping up trade within the African subcontinent. Looking more closely at what states can do. I mean, if you look at states that have been able to grow their IGR, Ogun, Kaduna, Bauchi, Rivers, and Osun are like the three big winners, or the five big winners for 2022, while the worst performers, and in this particular rank, are Borno, Plateau, Jigawa, Katsina, and Zamfara. So you have to ask yourself, what are these states doing wrong, and what were the winning states doing right? It boils down to the ease of doing business. How fast can I, as a business, as an entrepreneur, get permits, licenses, and approvals to set up my business? How easy is it for me as a person who wants to manufacture goods to get energy, and reliable energy where I do not have to pay through my nose for a generator? How safe is the state that I know I can move my goods from point A to point B without being harassed by touts, without being robbed? How easy is it for me to move my goods from point A to point B, looking at the quality of road infrastructure? And I want Nigerians to also bear in mind that, in the hundreds of kilometers of road network that we have in the country, the federal government has actually done over 60% of its share of the road network. The remaining percentages that are meant to be managed by states and local governments are really not being paid attention to. They're really being neglected. And far too often, it is those, back roads, those hinterland roads that are the access points for manufacturers who, locate their manufacturing industries away from urban centers, and for the farmers who also farm in rural areas. So this is even one reason why there is high food inflation, because the quality of roads and the security has been very poor. Whether or not states want to work on their own, they can always look at what they can do as regions, with President Tinubu having signed bills into law that allow states to generate their own electricity. I think states can begin to look at themselves as regional blocks and dedicate certain land masses collectively to provide electricity. I think these are some of the things that states can do to improve their IGR.
I like the way you've closed with the regions, because Southwest is one example of regional cooperation. And they have the Dawn Commission, of course, and the Udwa Group, which is a very good example for what other regions in the country can learn from. Very interesting conversation. And let me just, to our audience, over 7 trillion has been appropriated by 24 out of 36 states for the 2024 budget. We expect the other 12 to bring it on board, and that may hit 10 trillion naira. So which means this is over 30% of the federal budget, which means that if it is translated to socio-economic development at the subnational level, we will see inclusive economic growth across the country. Thank you very much, Mr. Vahyala Kwaga, the Senior Researcher and Policy Analyst for BudgIT Foundation. Very interesting conversation we had today, looking at 2024 budget and focusing on subnationals. Hope to have you once again to discuss further on how the states are performing. Thank you very much once again for the time.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much for having me.
That will be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics Show. You can log on to our website, proshare.co, to get further insights on the conversation, and also join our social media platforms displayed on the screen. To come your way again, enrich yourself with the knowledge of socio-economic developments around you, because it is a wise thing to do. Thank you for watching. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong, and bye for now.